about the blessing of letting go as a part of your total wellness or a part of pursuing your total wellness. What do I mean by letting go? Have you ever heard somebody that when you have an issue with them, let's say today something has gone wrong and we are not really on good terms, they start taking you back to 2002, you did this. 2004, you did this. 2010, you did this. 2000 and that. And it feels like a chronicle has been opened. And then you are taken through the journey of how you've done this, you've done that, you've done that, you've done that. Some of us blame people that are no longer here with us. Some of us blame our uncles that died 20 years ago. Some of us blame so many people, so many different things for the reasons and for the issues that are happening around our lives. And to be fair, sometimes we can play that victimhood or victim mentality, and we decide to say, well, it is somebody so and so who did that, that's why I'm here. And I usually love, of course, I'm a Christian, so I love to use Bible stories as my best line for the things that I talk about, even though, again, I talk about nutrition, and it's mainly something that I spend time to strain, study, and invest time in it, and I teach at the moment. But if I go back to the story, it's mainly, I think it's in 2 Samuel, the story of Saul's son, Mephibosheth. This guy, he literally was born okay. He had his normal work. He could walk. He could go from one to B. His life was okay as any normal child that is born. And then as the news comes that his dad is passed, his granddad is passed, the nurse who was holding him or running away with him stumbles with him, and he ends up crippled. And so he starts looking at himself so differently, looks at himself, he even calls himself a dead dog, because to him hope was gone, because he's now crippled, and because things have happened the way they happened. He doesn't look at himself anymore from the angle that he can actually be able to be a decent human being and still be able to contribute to the society. And so he will have maybe spent time complaining and thinking about the nurse who dropped him off and things like that. And last week, as I was coming back from a ladies' meeting at church, I remember I was just being started to think about who caught you. Who caught you? Are you bleeding on the people that caught you, or you're bleeding on other people that are completely innocent? And so I was thinking, just to continue on that, if you haven't watched the video, I will link it in the description box below, because obviously I want to go into more in-depth nutrition. I want to talk about health. I want to talk about total wellness, but that will start from a healthy perspective. It will start from a place whereby if we have healed our emotions, our hearts, our every side of us, every part of us is healed, then we can be able to build up and start to do other things. In March, we will be doing a kingdom health journey, and where we will use Bible principles to try and encourage ourselves to eat healthy, to be able to walk healthily, to be able to practice things that will help us to catapult us into better health. But before we get there, I need to lay the ground for what we need to be doing, dealing with the stuff that can actually hinder us from being able to enjoy where we need to be and to enjoy that kingdom health. As I was going back into the story, or if I go back into the story of this young man, he will have been blaming the people around his life, right? He will have decided to say, well, it's because of auntie who dropped me off. But until it gets to a point that you decide to take full responsibility, it might not be your responsibility to be hurt. And most of the time when we get hurt, it's not us who are responsible for the hurt, but our healing is our responsibility. We have to take the responsibility and to decide, I'm not going to wallow in the past. I have to let go. I have to let go of those people that have hurt me. I've got to let go of the things that are not helping me at all. And even when you think about I've been recently reading with a couple of friends Hebrews 12, and it says, let us let go of the weight that does so easily entangle us and beset us from running the race that is set before us. You can't run if you've got rubble in your way. You can't run if you've got stuff that is holding you back. You can't run if you've got crap that is basically holding you back. That crap could be those hearts. That crap could be that such and such a person did this to me so many years ago. You got to get to a point that you just let go and let God. You have to get to a point you decide you're like, all right, I've just got to start anew, open a clean slate, forgive, move on, and then from there you start to strategize and think, how am I gonna be better? How am I going to have better relationships? How am I going to be able to have better communication? How am I going to be able to set healthy boundaries? How am I going to be able to have a better perspective of life and not look at life from the lenses or the angle of people that have actually done one thing or the other? Because let's face it, the truth of the matter is that as long as we live in this world, something will always happen. Somebody will do something. They will step on our feet, they will step on our toes, they will irritate us. All those things are normal. But when it comes to a point where you're holding on until they start to become like a stumbling block for you moving on, you have to get to a point and to tell yourself, it's time to arise, it's time to let go, it's time to move forward. And so if I go back into looking at this from the perspective of, for example, nutrition, you might get to a point maybe you are so used to a given way of living. You're so used to, maybe you are somebody who's addicted to things like coke. You might be addicted to sugar. You might be addicted to a given pattern and a given way of doing things. Sometimes you have to let go, break the cycle to be able to pick up new ways and new rhythms. It might be just that because you have a given pattern of doing things, the way you do things, that you are like, sometimes you're just in autopilot mode. Somebody can ask you, why do you do things the way you do it? Some of us do things the way we do them because that's how I was born. And when I was born, I found my parents doing that, and so I'm just gonna do that. You don't even sit down to question and think about, is this thing adding value to me? Is this thing making me a better human being? Is this thing contributing positively to my well-being? Is it contributing positively to my total wellness? And if the answer to any of those things is no, then maybe you have to let go of it. You might, and of course, sometimes the good is the enemy. They say good, good is the enemy of best, right? You can't be able to move into getting better at things if you're holding on to sometimes good. Sometimes it's the successes that keep us apart and they keep us away from moving to what is ahead of us. Sometimes it's the achievements that we've heard. Maybe you wanted to lose weight for a very long time, and then you lose weight, and then you get to a point to get addicted to that shift. That sometimes you just get so obsessed that it gets to a point you know very well that that obsession is not serving you well, because maybe it's a time to shift and step up things and maybe be able to do things a little bit different. But because you're holding on to that success, that it gets to a point that sometimes you just have to let go so that you can be able to have a better outlook of yourself, better outlook of your health, better outlook. And sometimes when you're setting goals, do you set realistic goals or do you set goals that, have you ever set a goal that shocks you? Have you ever set a goal that makes you feel, goodness me, why did I even set this in the first place? Is your dream big enough to actually make you decide, yesterday was great, but you know what? Yesterday is in the past, is in the past. I'm not gonna hold in history. I need to look at what is in the future. I need to look at my best, which is in the future. And sometimes we get to a point where we are holding on to the past, that our lives are constantly hidden, or our potential is actually stuck in that place where we are holding onto hurts, we're holding onto past successes, we are holding onto whatever it may be. But maybe shall I just be a blunt and remind us today that sometimes we just have got to let go. To say, if it's success, I am so grateful for every success in my life. But sometimes I've got to forget, as Paul says, forgetting what is behind, pressing towards the mark of the high calling, pressing to what is ahead. Sometimes we've got to kiss yesterday goodbye so that we can be able to dream about tomorrow. Sometimes we've got to learn. I'm not saying that dispute the lessons from yesterday. I'm not saying that you forget and delete yesterday from your book chapters of your life. It may have been a very painful day. It might be a very painful season that you've just gone through. Maybe you're still in that season, and I'm not discounting that at all. That still is part of your story. Your story can be somebody else's survival guide, right? But before it becomes somebody else's survival guide, you have to get to a point and ask yourself, what story am I telling? What narrative am I telling about my past? And in which lens am I seeing my story? Am I seeing it from the lens of my brother, my aunt, my so and so, my boyfriend who dumped me because he thought I'm not good enough? Or am I seeing it from the lens of I am enough, I am good enough? Even though God dumped yesterday, I can still be able to pick myself up and love myself enough to move in the future. But it calls for a lot and a lot of letting go, dying to self, and saying, you know what, I have a right to hold a grudge. I have a right to not forgive. But because I want to have a life that is full of peace, they say unforgiveness is drinking poison and expecting somebody else to die. You and I know if we drink poison, we are the ones who die. So why hold on to that? Why allow somebody to live in your mind rent free? Right? That's what we do when we wallow in the past, when we allow ourselves to constantly be limited by our past. And so today, it's just a reminder we need to forget about the past. We need to let go so that we can be able to enjoy the freedom that tomorrow is bringing. Tomorrow promises to be a great day, but for you to enjoy tomorrow, you've got to kiss goodbye to yesterday so that you can have a better today and a better future tomorrow.